Yo, what up, Nick? Boom.
How are you?
Good. Yo, I just want to tell you straight off the bat. I don't remember when this was, but I saw this interview with you and Marty Scurll when you were, it was probably last year, when you guys were going to do like some sort of some match. And that was incredible, bro. I really liked that a lot.
Thanks, man.
I like promos that people put thought into it. I like promos where they're not lazy, where your intelligence isn't insulted. You know what I'm saying?
We totally went off the cuff with that.
Yeah, that was great.
We actually shot that after we had done a pay-per-view that day. So like I had a match and it was like late and we just, I think that really helped because it was like had a big adrenaline dump and it was just kind of like everyone else like fucked off and we just had the studio empty and we're just me and Marty and we just sat down and I just kind of said to Marty, we kind of know where we're going, but I'm just gonna talk and we'll just sort of react off what I'm saying, you know, because we try to make it real.
Right. You know, and you know what I liked about it? That you were both feeding off of each other, you know, yeah. and extra bonus cool points for the debonair, suave James Bond, cool, you know, fucking fashion shit. Just great. Very well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of that show. I don't watch it now because I think you have to pay for it, but I will find a free link.
We're not doing Power at the moment. We've just kind of been. Marquez had this primetime live gimmick that's kind of like just a way, you know, a bridge. But I'm working on getting Power back. I'm working on Billy to do another season.
I like that show. I'm going to tell you why. Because first of all, when everybody says that they have a different promotion, really nobody does. Everybody's kind of like a variation of WWE in one sense or another. What I did like about this was like the wrestling. I don't know if you used to watch it in England. I don't know, but like WCW back in the 80s and 90s, like that's what it looked like, you know, with all those flags and a studio audience and that ring. So it was very reminiscent of those days, okay? And you had a lot of great characters and talkers from Eli Drake to yourself, the Marty Scurll to the fucking question mark.
Eddie Kingston.
You know.
Ricky Starks.
Ziggy Dice or whatever that guy's name was. What was his name? Zicky Dice?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You just had a lot of outlandish characters. James Storm, you know.
Sure.
So
that was really the intent was because I feel like a lot of people look at studio wrestling and they sort of almost say it in a derisive way, like, oh, when they used to do studio wrestling, you know, they used to do wrestling in a little studio, you know, under this assumption that all wrestling had to be like Monday Nitro or Monday Night Raw. It was like packed arenas and everyone going crazy. And, you know, but the thing is that like that, you know, in the grand scheme of things in the industry, that's a small period of time where the business was red hot, you know, and as a television property, like that's not realistic for everyone to do, you know, a startup company. It's like, we made the emphasis on speakers and, you know, good talkers and promos, like real interviews, not these kind of set up sort of strange, you know, exposition kind of scenes and stuff, you know.
Scripted promos where people are saying things they never would say in real life.
Right. And and I love stickman interviews. I always have. Like, that's why I lobbied for Sean Mooney to come back. And, you know, I know that Sean Mooney wasn't synonymous with the NWA. He was synonymous with the WWF. But he was like, he for me, I like to have an interviewer, a stickman that has some, like, gravitas and a little bit of his own personality, not just sort of a nondescript, like, person that's just going to get, like, jabroned by all the wrestlers. And, you know, it's like, Mean Gene was a character. Like, he had gravitas, you know, he had, like, it. So then when he's speaking, it's like, you know, I like a bit of that newsman feel to the interviewer. And I wanted, I wanted guys to, you know, be good extemporaneous speakers and just, and go with whatever was in front of you and just kind of wing it. Because ultimately, like you said, Konnan, it's like, we've got plenty of the other stuff, like the TV format for virtually every show besides maybe Lucha Underground, which I really liked that show when it was going. Was the format was the same for every single show. It was based off of Monday Nitro and then Monday Night Raw. It was like, okay, it's a 2-hour show. We have to start with an in-ring promo and then we do a match and then there's a promo, you know, whatever. And it's like, there's all this style of television production, but prior to that no one sort of exploring. And when you really think about the iconic promos in our industry, like for me, a lot of the time you go back to Flair and Dusty, and they were studio. They were a guy with it, it was like Bob Caudle, or it was, Tony Schiavone or David Crockett, whatever. And they
Gordon
were Soley. And the guy was going down the lens and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and here's why. And it's like, it's a different, when you really break it down, it's like some guy walking out to the ring with a microphone for no reason is kind of weird. You know what I mean? It's like when The Rock is your measuring stick for that, then obviously, yeah, like you're going to say that it works, but it's The Rock. Like he can walk out but you've got to be so over to be able to just walk out to the ring with a microphone and just talk, and hold an arena full of people. It's not natural. Like even in TNA, I remember when I was the world champion TNA, I remember like always trying to lobby to have JB do interviews with me instead of just, do we have to open the show with me walking out to the ring and talking for 10 minutes? It's like, I feel like it's, it's just played out. Like I was like, why can't I have JB interview me, or, someone, right? Like something to bounce off of, because it's like, it's a conversation with the audience essentially.
And one of the things, Nick, that, one of the reasons those talkers back then were so incredible was because back then, if you remember, they made their money off the house.
Right.
So they had to convince people to go. Like, for example, I'm from Miami. So the show would come out on Saturday, right? And they would wrestle Miami Beach on Wednesday. So they were trying to get you to fill that place out on Wednesday because that's how they were paid.
Sure.
So they were really bringing the heat back then.
Yeah, and in a way, we were kind of in the same position, or we are. We will be when we get Power back, because we don't get a rights fee for that show. So all of our, we're putting all our eggs in one basket and basically giving you this show that we hope you enjoy. But the idea is that by the end of the story arc, of every season or whatever, you're going to buy the pay-per-view, because like that, and so that we're in the same position. Like we have no fat on our show, because there's no space for it. Like right. A lot of the time, if there was a discussion, and look, I'm not a booker, and I'm not, and certainly not officially, but obviously I have, a certain degree of influence and say on what goes on the show and whatever. But if I was asked on any angle, my first question was always, can it lead to something where people part with their money, right? Like, does it lead to a pay-per-view? Is there a payoff, right? Because we don't have the luxury of a rights fee where we can go, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we do this thing where where like so-and-so's doing this? Well, only if I don't care if it's funny or intriguing or interesting or whatever. It's like, I'm only interested in it if it leads to a way to get people to part with their money.
Well, here's the thing, and this is, I think, what you're trying to say, and like I think we all agree on, is that there's with the dirt sheet guys having a lot of influence today, and the type of stuff they like, and a generation of wrestlers feeding into their tastes, is what we've seen over the past 10 years, maybe even a little bit longer, is a war between old school wrestlers and the younger generation over the war on the suspension of disbelief. And you see, like what you guys try to do, the show, the premise is centered around the suspension of disbelief, that I want people to be invested that these guys are talking about a fight that they're going to happen that we want you to see. And what we've seen in wrestling, with Meltzer, the rating system and everything, you just have guys invested in, hey, how good is this match going to be?
Right.
And let's rate the work and the artistic impression of these guys, and
right.
and then by people that have never done it before. And stuff like
the execution of a pro wrestling match.
A critique of skills that they've never, played. And I see the NWA show adheres to the suspension of disbelief, and it's funny because remember when Ring of Honor, back in the Attitude Era, the fans became a part of the show, signs, stuff, and everything, but they were invested in the suspension of disbelief and stuff. But then it kind of went sideways when the Ring of Honor fans were bringing the streamers to the matches like the Japanese fans. So you have the wrestling fans now cosplaying other wrestling fans and acting like other fans, right? And that kind of gestated into the This Is Awesome crowd, and it's just repeated. Okay, but the funny thing about the NWA is your crowd behaves like a wrestling crowd.
Yes.
Like wrestling fans. It was funny because we had this kid, the Masked Fan, on. He's one of our patrons, and he did think
he's one of our Patreons.
And he brought this up, maybe even talk about this, that like some of the guys that bring in that style of the phoniness, let's just do the acrobatics for the sake of acrobatics, bro, they were getting booed.
Yeah.
And these are guys that would be getting cheered if they were on the other shows that just throw suspension of disbelief out the window. Tell me about that.
And expanding on that, also, certainly in season 1, there were a few fans who came in who sort of went to their sort of bread and butter of doing the whole, doing the chants and doing the sort of Pavlovian, like you said, the sort of parody of a wrestling fan sort of routine. And like the audience shut them down and they went, no, we don't do that here. Like not in a sort of aggressive way or in a weird way, but just, they were just kind of like, really? Like, no, you're in the wrong place for that. Like they're part of the show in the right way. Like ultimately, it's one of the reasons why we held off doing Power as long as we could, because when we were all wondering how long COVID was going to last, because we were kind of like, man, the audience is such a vital part of the experience, the viewing experience, because they were so reactive, and because like if you watch the interview segments on our show, you can tell that a lot of the stuff that's happening is extemporaneous, because somebody in the audience might shout something and you might know, and most of the time, or the guys who are real slick on the mic will pick up on it and expand on the point or react to them and have a conversation with them. Like we had this one thing where I did one of my favorite promos I did with Sean Mooney, and it was actually on that same episode. That's what maybe we had the sit down with Marty and I. With like I said something, I'm like teeing up this segment later on in the show, going like, when you see what happens in this sit down, you will know, blah blah blah. And right halfway through it, like some guy shouts like, "Thank you, Nick." And I was like, "Yeah, you're welcome." And the whole place popped, because it's like, and I think it's I've always believed that wrestling fans really work a lot on a subconscious level. I certainly remember sort of picking up on stuff when I was just a fan and thinking, and understanding that I think I'm supposed to feel this way, but not really being able to put my finger on what it was. And I think that's kind of how people feel when they watch our show, is that when they see moments like that, it allows them to really understand, like, this is happening off the cuff. He didn't meticulously plan every single second of this segment, like it's happening in front of our eyes. It's organic. And, I don't know, I'm not really saying anything, certainly for Konnan, I'm really not saying anything that you don't already know, but, it's like booking and promoting are really very, very, very close together, in the sense that, like Dana White said this great thing on an interview where he basically said, the odds makers in Vegas will tell me who's most likely to win the fight, that I promote, right? They'll say, this guy's the favorite, he's better at this, he's better at that, he's undefeated, yada, yada. Dana White said, it's my job as a promoter to do everything I can between now and the fight to convince people that maybe not, like to put some doubt in people's mind, like, oh, I don't know. You really, the audience should come into every single match, for the most part, with the idea that, it could go either way. Like, I want one person to win, but the other person's capable of winning too, and I think I just right from the beginning, I just wanted to sort of reintroduce that idea, and with the 10 Pounds of Gold series, just that idea that let's really focus and take some time on building this match as a contest between two individuals, not because we're trying to insult anyone's intelligence and, kayfabe and yada, 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 but just to get people to go, oh, actually, I don't necessarily know what the outcome of this is going to be. And you remind them of that, because instead of just seeing a match and hearing like, oh, well, they're pushing this guy, so he's probably going to win, or, this guy has heat, so he's probably going to lose, or like, oh, they're building to like so-and-so versus so-and-so at the pay-per-view, so he's probably going to beat him. It's like, we would do everything we could to create a situation where people will go, like, I'm really pulling for the other guy. Like Cody's the best example with Cody and I, because obviously that was a big match, and obviously a lot of the characteristics of the build were unique, because it was like, two different guys never faced each other from two different promotions, never really sort of crossed paths or anything. But I always thought that the big X factor in the promoting of that really helped get it over the top to the sort of next level was the fact that we worked like the smart fans too, not in a way where we, tried to sort of deliberately confuse them or swerve them or anything, but just in that sense that everyone was like, well, wait a minute, Nick's the NWA champion, but Cody's under contract to Ring of Honor. So like, there's no way that they're going to book Cody to win because like, he's not under contract to them, and we created it was just all those, and all the things were right there in front of us. We didn't have to really create anything, nothing that was said in that build. And really not a lot that's been said in a lot of my stuff with the NWA has been untrue. It's just been, I take what's really there and then expand on it or kind of, maybe jazz it up a little bit so that people can go, oh yeah, like I'm interested to see where this is going now, because they don't have to take a big leap. Right. And I know that I'm rambling here, but like, let
me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Cody. Because
they
didn't like. I mean, he said that, but if he knew me, we'd get.
I mean, if he was on this call right now, he would see that your name in the chat is the superior one.
You're right. So let's. I want to talk about this.
I just want to say real quick that that really gets my goat.
Oh God! Please do that.
Whoa! Wait a minute,
Nick. I didn't think I would want to do this to you ever because you're so cool. But
freaking
wow.
So let me ask you this.
Amazing.
So when Cody came out of WWE and he went on the indie scene, it's like all of a sudden he was like, you were kind of like the top dog on the indie guy because you're the NWA champion. It's like, okay, I've got the indie champion spot, but I've got the NWA belt and everything. And now here comes Cody. And Cody, very well dressed, very intelligent, very articulate, and created this fan base immediately, right? Bro, I thought this was fascinating because I was just thinking about in the back of my mind because Cody, AEW was starting to become a thing and stuff and everything. Bro, what was the negotiation like over that match behind the scenes? Was it as difficult as I probably imagined? A little bit like, little rough, try to figure out what are we going to do here? Because I know you don't want just, Billy, who had the belt? Was it Billy? Had the rights to that belt at the time? Or was that just okay? Yeah. So, so there's a lot of moving parts there. How did that go?
I hate to ruin the illusion, but it was actually really easy.
Right.
Truthfully, I've said this before, so it shouldn't be any great shock.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, Nick.
That's one of the tenets of the show. Right? Go ahead.
Yeah, but what's interesting is like we never had a single conversation about who was going over. It was I think the long and short of it was basically we agreed to do at least 2, and we hoped to get 3. But with the timing, and then with his contract coming up at Ring of Honor and Tony Khan coming into play and starting up AEW, the third one became it wasn't possible. So really it was we knew that we were going to do the switch and then switch it back at some point. And like, as for the rest of it, Cody and I have got, we've got weird chemistry. Like we didn't know each other well. But we understood that we matched up well on all the levels, right? Like there was these sort of
like all the metrics.
Right. And I think that, it was really honestly, as far as like something that was a big deal, it was the easiest sort of negotiation. It wasn't really a negotiation. It would be a situation where most of the time we were on the same page as far as ideas for the build and for even the sort of details of the match. Like I remember thinking about, it might be cool if we did like boxing style entrances with entourages and stuff. And literally an hour later, I got a text from Cody going, "Hey, do you want to do entourages?" You know what I mean? It was, we just kind of.
So now we know where this comes from.
No, Nick,
because Cody always has an entourage now. Like when he comes out, it's like we've always discussed.
We both individually had the idea, but for me, I had said pretty openly a lot that I'm a boxing fan, so I've always felt like
who's your guy? Who's your guy?
Triple G is probably my favorite fighter. I'm actually quite a big. I'll watch most fights if the Mexicans fighting because most of the time they're just going to bang, and that's fun for me, and they're fiery. But I actually talked to Carlos Molina a couple of weeks ago for a fight that was pretty cool. He had a big pay-per-view on Mexican Independence Day. But
let me ask you something real quick. I don't want to get into boxing, but I just want to ask you this. Did you watch those old school fights like Tommy Hearns versus Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler? Okay, that's the best. Yeah. Okay.
No, and I was heartbroken when HBO stopped doing boxing because
me too.
Like the way HBO present boxing
was incredible.
It was like the gold standard of sports television. Yeah. And I'm not ashamed to say, like, I've shamelessly tried to replicate it as much as I can in the way we do stuff, in the build to our stuff. And so a lot of it came from that. And I the Cody match had that. I knew that it would have a good reaction. So then I could sort of, because you know how it is. It's like when you know that something's going to work, you suddenly have all these other options available, right? Like you have all these, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did this or cool if we did that? But it's like a lot of this stuff doesn't work unless people give a shit. So it's like, because we knew that people were going to give a shit, it was like, then we could really, play around with some really fun little sort of things. But the Cody, our sort of dynamic has always been what I imagined and what I've heard through, from stories and stuff, that kind of a lot of those sort of old school top guys kind of have with each other, where they were like frenemies, right? Like Flair and Dusty, they loved each other, but they also had like a bit of a,
each guy wanted to go over.
Oh yeah,
I want to go over. But it doesn't do a each guy still wants to win the match, right?
Sure, like
there's an underlying tension. There's an underlying tension, which is always good because you got to stay on your toes and you're competitive. Because having worked with you before, having worked with Cody before, I almost feel that I don't think who is going to win the title is more important than the match being good. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, like at the end of the day, it was a piece of business, and we all, for me, it was one of those rare moments where I knew if we did it right, everybody would come out the other end better. So it was kind of like, once you have a situation like that, then so you really start to have fun, because it's like, hey, I trusted Cody and I think he trusted me. But at the same time, we also knew that it was good for business if we had a little bit of competitive tension with each other. Like I remember him texting Lagana and being like, hey, what kind of shape is Nick in? Like, is he looking good? And blah, blah, blah. Because Cody had suggested, hey, what if we do a weigh-in? And I was kind of like, what you mean is a pose down? I mean, that's essentially what it was. And I was kind of like, hey, I got no problem with that. But like, here's a funny story. So I was in real good shape for that. And, because I was working a lot. I mean, I defended the title all over the world. I was wrestling all the time, like having long matches. I was like, my cardio was great. I'm like 250 at the moment, but I was like 235 then. So it was like real nice and lean and cut. And I remember going to that weigh-in, and Davari was with me, and this guy in Chicago was like a luxury car dealer. So he'd lent me like a Mercedes G-Wagon and a Bentley for like me and my boys, like for the whole weekend to kind of cruise around in. So I rocked up in the Bentley, but like I had like an appearance, and then I had to rush back and get changed and come back for the weigh-in and stuff. Like I was starving. Like so me and Sean get in the Bentley, and I pull through a Wendy's and get like a triple cheeseburger, like milkshake, blah blah. So I pull up out right outside the StarCast hotel gimmick, whatever, like not on purpose, so everyone would see me fucking jump out holding this Wendy's and like walk through into the back, and it was like all the New Japan brass, all the Impact brass, Jeff and Karen Jarrett, like obviously all the elite guys. We're all in this little green room before the thing, and like Cody's there like doing push-ups, and like thing, and I just rock up like eating a cheeseburger, like, hey, what's up, buddy? And he was just like, oh, come on, man. Like,
getting in his head, that's ghetto fab.
Little shit like that to fuck with each other, just to sort of keep that like
that competitive friendly.
Yeah.
You can catch part 2 of our interview with the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis on next week's show. But for now, follow Nick on Twitter at RealNickAldis, NickAldis, or follow the NWA at NWA.